The Visual Media Arts Visiting Artist Program looked at culturally diverse professionals in their field, and the faculty provided outreach to the students that in their programs as well as outside of their programs, trying to make sure that we were hitting all of the culturally diverse students on the campus. For completion, we set up well, not we, but the proposal set up an EOPS book loan. There are other book loan projects on campus, and it's quite obvious to me that we need to start working together with the other efforts on campus to make sure that the books are getting to the right people and that the students know where to find the books. We have a reserve textbook project in the library. The Student Athlete Success Center has a reserve program also. For course completion, some of these will overlap into the different four areas that we need to be addressing, so you might see them a couple times. For English, Accelerated English, they're looking at combining the certain English courses, 801A, 801B, and 105, to assist the students in completing their basic skills at an accelerated level. The multicultural English cohort, they're working off of a state and federal type of recommendation from an association that exists that several courses, several faculty get together and they identify a book, and then the entire cohort reads that book, and then they analyze the book and analyze different ways that they can maybe come and make a change and be a change agent on campus. ESL, we provided, well, their project asked for supplemental reading and writing materials. Math was on fire. They came to us with 4 proposals, some having to do with professional development and some having to do with accelerated math projects. You'll see that reading also has an accelerated math project, which is called Reimagining Read 881 and 880 and 881 into a single self-paced computer-assisted course. So acceleration is hot on our heels. With degree and certificate completion, there was a brain-based learning and career development course offering for students. I think this might get at some of the discussions that were had earlier about students being intrinsically motivated and understanding why they're here and not just having to go through the motions. Under transfer, we had Mentoring Long Beach Reads One Book. That program assisted the students, they identified students and hooked them up with a mentor to read the book and then discuss the book and find out how maybe they can be an agent of change on campus. And then with multiple outcomes, we have an African American learning community that's going to be working obviously with that population and other populations. It's very similar to Emoja or the Puente program. I can read these to you, but if you have any specific programs about any of these efforts on campus, we're here to answer your questions. I wanted to give you an overview of the different kinds of projects and proposals that are happening now at Long Beach City College. Moving forward, we're going to start evaluating these programs. Again, these were implemented this fall 2016. So now we're going to go into the evaluation stage in the spring. As I mentioned, we have a student equity subcommittee of the Student Success Committee, and here are the members. We're still looking to fill a couple vacant spots, but we're going to be working hard with those groups. We've had the opportunity to meet 3 times this semester. The goals and actions of the group as it relates back to the access, we need to provide focused outreach for disproportionately impacted students. Under course completion, the committee is discussing targeted interventions for the populations. With basic skills, you saw many projects looking at acceleration. Degree certificates and transfers, we're obviously going to support those structured pathways that are happening across the campus. With alignment with the SSSP plan, the BSI plan, and the categorical programs, with the assistance of the Student Success Committee, which is a broader looking type of committee that knows where all these pieces are operating and how all of the dollars on campus can work together to best support programs and success programs for students. That's where all of that work is going to be happening. So we're just going to feed up into that Student Success Committee. There was a Senate Bill 860 that requires that we obviously focus our efforts on former foster youth, students with disabilities, low-income students, and veterans. So the money came through the state for student equity, and then this bill came separately, asking us to focus on these groups as we go through and look at our proposals. For institutionalization of the Student Equity Committee, and I think this is the big thing now moving forward this year, as an institution, we need to start looking at what is called equity-mindedness thinking. It's a term that we use to broaden our knowledge about what equity really is and what it's going to mean to Long Beach City College. People can tell us the definition of equity, but we need to make it our own. And so that's the work of this group moving forward, is to have a more institutional look at what equity means to us. Through the use of data tools, inquiry based on that data, through the process of problem solving and asking questions of the data, we need to create a theory of change and a framework of change for the institution so we can really get into what the issues of equity are for Long Beach City College. We need to approach this with academic leadership and faculty leadership. And the approach would be, with the end result being embedding the culture of equity-mindedness here at Long Beach City College. Until we take a look at ourselves and our own biases, there's nothing that we can do to change the way that we deal with the issues that we need to handle here at Long Beach City College. So again, as we move forward as the institution, we need the commitment to an intentional practice and procedure. That was a good mix of words. We must define our terms and create a shared understanding of a conceptual framework for equity. We need to remember that equity refers to quantity. Equality refers to quantity. Equity refers to quality. Can I say it again? Equality refers to quantity. Equity refers to quality. So we want to strive to create quality programs, not just more programs. And I think that that's going to be our challenge. Equity is not about fairness or the idea of sameness. It requires critical analysis and systems change in an effort to support the uniqueness that people bring to our institution. Some of the, I'm not doing it. Thank you.
Shauna talked a little bit about the actions and goals that are outlined in the plan. As far as the evaluation piece goes, internally at Long Beach City College, we have a student equity research analyst who is dedicated solely to evaluating our equity efforts on campus. We plan internally on having a yearly report that will go out to the Student Success Committee and then out campus-wide to discuss the progress of what we've done on campus. From the Chancellor's Office point of view, the overall initiative, there is no evaluation required this year in the plan. That will be something that will be required next year. So next year, when we're up here yet again talking about this, there will be an evaluation piece where we will be asked to talk about what we've done and the progress we've made toward closing the equity gaps. Other conversations that have happened, sort of going to what Shauna was talking about the institutionalization of student equity, is the idea of how can we include it in larger evaluation processes. So at Long Beach, talking about equity when it comes to strategic master plan, which we're currently working on. We've talked about it, in the student success committee about how do we infuse equity into our department plan and our program review process, into the school plans, so that it becomes part of our everyday lens when we look at what we are doing at Long Beach City College. So that's another way that we can hopefully evaluate our progress, is by this sort of infusion of equity into all aspects of what we do here at this institution. Thank you. And now, if there are any questions.
Questions by any members of the board?
I just have a comment.
Sure.
Sean, I just wanted to commend you for doing such a great job. It's fantastic. This is something that I think we all can agree on, that we need to focus on. And it's important. I've heard that there's been meetings held on campus, particularly with the African American students. And I think it's wonderful to see that we're expanding our work and looking at areas where we can do more of, and as far as equity goes. And I really love what you said about quality. It was fantastic, and I look forward to supporting you and getting more updates, and really appreciate your hard work.
Great. Any other questions or comments by trustees? This is an action item, so I would entertain a motion that we approve the Long Beach Community College District Student Equity Plan as submitted.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Zia, seconded by trustee Archuleta. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Irma Archuleta.
Aye.
Virginia Baxter.
Aye.
Jeff Kellogg.
Aye.
Doug Otto.
Aye.
And Sunny Zia.
Aye.
8.1 carries unanimously. We are now back
Good job.
to, pardon? Okay. To 4.1, student success, improving student success at Long Beach City College. And I think we're going to have some comments by our institutional effectiveness thing. And maybe I'll say a few words at the beginning about what it is that we're doing here, or remind people that what we're doing as a board is, and in our board goals, the goals of the school, are focusing on student success and what that means. It's been going on for a while now. We started way back in I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago. Long Beach participated in the California Leadership Alliance for Student Success program over a 2-year period. That was followed by the Community College League of California pursuing a commission on the future of community colleges, which then I think gave birth to the student success movement. There was legislation in the state legislature. A variety of efforts were made nationally from various foundations, the Gates Foundation, the Lumina Foundation, and many others. And we brought to California the Governance Institute for Student Success. The first one was here at Long Beach City College. There have been 4 or 5 other ones in the last couple of years, and we've made a commitment here at Long Beach City College to not only pursue student success, but to follow what it is that we are doing. And at the last GIS conference in San Diego County, we made a commitment that we would talk about student success at some level at each of our meetings. We've had a variety of meetings with the administration and talked about how we might go about doing that. And this is one of those. And with that quick introduction, I'd ask whoever's going to give this report to do that.
Thank you, Board President Otto. I'll introduce it, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Eva Bagg. This is the beginning of a formal series of presentations that will take place over the remainder of the academic year. These presentations are happening at the college first through our college planning committee, and then they will be followed by the subsequent board meeting to ensure that the college is well informed of the discussions taking place, and then bring them to the Board of Trustees. One of the most critical roles that any community college board plays is in asking questions about where we're at in improving the success of our students. Not only is this a suggested practice and a good practice for governing boards, but it is becoming a requirement under the accreditation standards, and particularly the new accreditation standards, which will put a focus on student achievement. And so boards will be scrutinized to determine if they are paying enough attention to the questions that are pertinent to understanding the student population, understanding where students are in terms of completion, and those measurements which we are all being measured by. So to begin to shape this, Dr. Bagg and her team in institutional effectiveness have drafted a series of research briefs that the college is going to be using to ask questions internally, and then will be used to present to the board and allow the board to ask questions as well. So without stealing too much more of Dr. Bagg's thunder, I will turn it over to her to discuss the briefs and how we're going to approach this.
So thank you, President Oakley, Board President Otto, and members of the board and the executive committee. Thank you. I really, I don't have a great deal to present, and hopefully it's a relief to you that tonight we will not be presenting data at the end of a long meeting. But really, I just wanted to, first of all, express our appreciation to the board for its continued focus on student success and its support of the college to better understand the varied needs of our student population so that we can continue to improve their educational outcomes. One way the college is working to sustain institutional focus on student success is to provide the series of research briefs that President Oakley has mentioned. These briefs delve fairly deeply into the current state of student progress and achievement for our students at LBCC. They were developed in part to support our strategic planning efforts that are underway currently, and to facilitate collective inquiry into what is working to support student success, and to identify opportunities that emerge from a close study of our data. So what we have here, really, and it's in your board documents, is a listing of the 7 research briefs. And we're starting to talk about these in some of our college planning committees. We're sharing them with the academic senate and with a variety of focus groups that are coming together to develop our strategic plan, so that that work is really rooted in evidence and, like I said, study about what's happening with our students. So just to kind of give you a flavor, scrolling through some of these reports, and the first one is looking at the impact of our new associate degrees for transfer. We're seeing these are becoming very popular, and they seem to be having an impact more broadly on our overall completion rates and transfer. You might remember at the board retreat, I think it was in August, where we shared the student success scorecard. That was really kind of a jumping off point for us, receiving your questions and the research office really delving more deeply into some of the issues. So one of the things that we talked about at the board retreat was the college is doing fairly well with the educational milestone of the completion of 30 units, taking that cohort snapshot of students after 6 years. But we asked the question, then why aren't more students completing? We really want to work on that. I think it's 41% after 6 years that the students in the cohort that we track actually complete one of the meaningful outcomes, degree, certificate, or transfer. So we're delving into that. Who are those students who actually go on to complete compared to those who aren't? So we can figure out the demographics and look at the supports that are working for some better than others. Looking very closely at our basic skills programs. This has been an ongoing study at the college. Promise Pathways will have an additional update. We've had a lot of conversation over the years. We've had good questions from faculty about how we define student success. And we recognize that currently our scorecard does not capture low unit or just students who are coming to take a course or two and go on to get jobs or update their, get promotions in their jobs. So we're building off of work that's being done in the state around what we call skills builders. So we will bring a presentation to you about what we know about those students, where they're taking courses, really to generate more conversation about that population of students and how we can work with our CT areas more closely to really identify this success of the college that isn't normally captured by the state scorecard. Student educational plans through our student support services, Student Success Act, we're doing a great job. The counseling department really getting students to develop their educational plans. So in the research office, we're taking a look at that and looking at how those plans are actually helping to inform student behavior, to be taking those courses that get them more efficiently through programs to degree and certificate completion. Also, we noticed that we have a lot of students who transfer who don't complete their degree, so we're delving into that. Who are those students? What's going on with them? So these briefs are all intended really to start the conversation. That's what we really want to do, both internally at the college, but also with the board. So this is the start. We're developing other research briefs, but I know we will be working with you as you request student success data to bring that forward and to collaborate with departments who are doing various things to address some of the issues that you see in the data, that you'll also get a sense of what we're doing to improve our outcomes for students.
Great.
So we look forward to sharing this with you.
Okay. Comments by trustees?
I have comments.
Trustee Archuleta?
Thank you, and I think this is a great beginning for us to start that dialogue. I know when we attended that session, it was emphasized how important it is for board members to start thinking about how we're going to frame the questions in relation to student success, where it just doesn't become this annual report that we receive and we just sit here and listen to the presentation, but how are we going to set those standards and what are the benchmarks that we're going to set for student success? When you mention about, even just as an example, the student success plans, you say we're doing a great job. So I think now it behooves this board, and I hope that in the near future, one of our retreats focuses on, and when you're ready to present that data, that you can share that with us, and then we can begin to talk about, okay, what are those standards, what are those benchmarks that we're going to establish? For instance, when you say about the educational plans, how do we define what it means to do a good job? Is it having students, 50% of the students completed with their comprehensive? Is that a good job? Is it 80%? How do we define what is a good job? The same thing with students making academic progress. We know that that's part of the mandate, that students have to make academic progress. Well, how do we define what, again, is the good benchmark for making good academic progress? So again, I can go on and on, but you get the picture.
Right.
The one area that I am really interested in, because I know that we now have at least 4 or 5 years, and this is into the implementation of the ADTs. And what would be interesting to see is, as you say, many of our students are now using the ADTs more and more. And so I'm interested in looking at, you know, how many of those students who have transferred using those have actually been accepted. And I know,
Right.
aside from Cal State Long Beach, I know our students apply elsewhere, but how many of those students have actually been accepted into their first choice institution? And then also looking further into how many of those students that transferred using the ATD actually have already successfully completed their baccalaureate degree at the university of their choice. So just to see, so again, those are part of the bigger picture in terms of student success. So,
Those are great questions, and that's really pushing things beyond just what happens here. And, you know, I would say that some of the work of the Long Beach College Promise, where we're, you know, sharing what the experience is at Cal State Long Beach for the students who are coming in with ADDs, exactly what you're expressing interest in. We'll be having more and more details about that coming over the next year. Thank you.
thank you.
Are there questions or comments? I think one of the goals of this process that we're undertaking is to make the board more sophisticated in the way that it looks at not just student success, but what's going on in those areas. For example, one of your papers is how can we strengthen basic skill courses at Long Beach City College? Gee, I think we ought to be eliminating basic skills courses at Long Beach City College because it takes away from our ability to move students along. And what we might want to be doing instead is recommending that those courses be, working with our high schools, that those courses can be taken there. And we're doing testing now at the end of 11th grade. And we want to get out of the basic skills business because it's a black hole, and students don't move forward if they're doing basic skills classes. Questions that I'm interested in, for example, are, so if you have students that come here, enroll, and never complete a single course, who are those students? And what, you know, those students are going to be a real drain on society in the future. They're not going to achieve their goals, and there may be particular things we can learn about them, but we're not going to catch those in the completed 15 units, completed 30 units. And I'll just give one other example that I think might be, that we might think about, and I'm trying to remember what that example was now. It's once we get education, once we test and place students, once we get their education plans in place, and we have an understanding of where they're going to go, what are we doing to touch them at the end of the semester, at the end of the year? Because the literature that I see says that unless you continuously touch and find out where students are, they have a tendency to spin off, to not complete. And we want to know the reasons for that. And you can't do that unless we have systems in place to make that happen. And it's largely student services things. I know we've done some studies to figure those things out, but the board needs to have that degree of sophistication when it thinks about student success data. It needs to say, where are we going? Where are we getting there? And do we have the information that do we need, or do we need additional information? So I'm looking forward to a robust and ongoing discussion about these things. Trustee Archuleta.
Yes, yes, and I think the issue with basic skills and the concern that I have with basic skills, and it's not necessarily the basic skills courses, but it's more about the disproportionate number of Latino, African American, students of color that end up in those courses and end up having to go through that cycle that takes them longer to, you know, complete their education. I think that's where the concern is, at least from my perspective, of how do we accelerate, or how do we help these students so that they don't get caught up in that cycle that oftentimes discourages them from, you know, staying enrolled, and they do a lot of that, you know, stop and go and stop and go. So I think that's what I would like to see, is how do we address that issue? I do think there is a need for basic skills because we do have adult learners, but I don't want to see the disproportionate numbers that we know end up in, of students of color that end up in those courses. So,
Anyone else? Any other questions on this item? Information only. Thank you for your presentation. You bet. Okay. Now we'll go to agenda item 4.2, which is regarding the recommendations of the Ad hoc Committee on Communicating with the Long Beach Community College District constituencies.